part 2 of Making Friends with Your Food, presented by myself, Professor Rosalind Gruben, and my partner, Dr. Douglas Graham. The topic for this evening is personal empowerment through food choices. And what we're going to be focusing on is the challenges that people come across when they don't find they're able to adhere to the diet that they had decided they were going to follow. The way that people relate to their food, and people who might even classify themselves as suffering from disordered eating, feeling that their food governs their choices rather than they governing their own food choices. I begin by talking about addiction. Normally, when one hears that word addiction, what comes to mind is alcohol and recreational drugs. Few people realize how addicted they are to the foods that they're eating. So what does addiction really mean? Some people will say that certain substances, including food, can actually cause your body to crave them, even though they are destroying the integrity and health of the body. This somehow doesn't make sense. Well, let's clarify why it doesn't. From the moment of your conception, your body is programmed to survive. And everything about your body's programming is tuned in to that purpose. So whenever your body loses its homeostatic state, its state of balance, the body takes action to bring itself back in balance so it can do more than survive, it can thrive. The body is in no way self-destructive. The very fact that if you cut yourself and it heals, your body is programmed to repair itself. It simply wouldn't make sense that the body was going to become drawn and addicted to something that was poisoning it. It doesn't seem to make sense. What actually happens is certain substances, including alcohol and recreational drugs, and including foods which are available to us today that are not part of our natural dietary, that when we consume them or take them into our bodies, they bring about a shift. And that shift in our psychological experience or in our physiological experience. We might feel stimulated and we think we've got extra energy. What we've got is the body on red alert as a result of a poison having entered it, which leads us to feel stimulated and on edge. We think that substance has given energy. That substance gives us a shift because it puts us into a numb state, unable to access so easily our emotions. That substance relaxes us or leads to our musculature becoming less tense. One's psychological experience or physiological experience can be altered once substances enter its domain that are toxic and are threatening to it. It's not the substances themselves that we become addicted to. It is the shift in the psychological or physiological experience that results from having ingested them. So we can no longer say coffee's addictive or cigarettes are addictive. Not to the body, they're addictive to the person who is living inside the body because of the shift that they bring about in their life experience. Every animal on the planet has a diet that it is designed by nature to consume. Its anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and psychological disposition are programmed to match the type of food that it's designed for. As soon as we start to eat outside of what nature has designed for us, we do pay the price in our health, both psychologically and physiologically. In addition to that, foods outside of our natural dietary are those very foods that intoxicate us to the point of bringing about a shift in our psychological or physiological experience. To give you just a couple of examples. Grains, the stuff of life. My partner, Doug Graham, refers to them as a crutch of life rather than a staff, meaning these are things that will destroy you and weaken you as opposed to things that will strengthen you. We are not physiologically designed to consume grains. The complexity of the starches that they contain and the intensity of the starches they contain is not something that we have the ability in our digestive system to break down effectively. Apart from the practicalities of the problem of digesting grains unless we subject them to heat, which we can do and reduce their complex structures down to a more simpler form of carbohydrate known as dextrin, which allows us to be able to attempt to digest them. But there are some innate properties within grains which bring about shifts in our psychological or physiological experience. Rarely can people sit down and have one slice of bread, one cookie, or one piece of cake. They go back for the second and the third and the fourth because it has this addictive quality. Foremost, grains contain an inordinate number of opioids. It brings opium to mind, and quite rightly so, because that is what we're talking about when we're talking about opioids. We're talking about opium. You may or may not know, but opium is recognized as having this ability to cause incredible shifts in people's psychological and physical experience. Opium is known to be highly addictive. In addition to that, grains have the effect on your body of stimulating the increased production of serotonin. And serotonin is produced from the brain stem. It's the same thing that you will produce more of when you exercise vigorously. It's the feel-good factor. So when we have bread or when we have cookies or cakes or pastries, when we take grains into our system, including pasta and other such health foods, what we're doing is getting a fix of opium and we're getting a fix of increased serotonin production to make us feel good. It's hardly surprising, therefore, that these incredible shifts in our experience are things that we can become addicted to. Grains are exceptionally addictive, and we have with us a book that Dr. Graham has written himself after many years of research into the subject called Grain Damage, which obviously is a play on words with brain damage, and it's a book I recommend. It's packed with real scientific facts about grains and why they're not helpful to include in your diet. Cooked foods in and of themselves are addictive for various reasons, some of which are to do with nutritional bankruptcy as much as they are to do with shifts in your psychological or physiological experience. When you subject food to heat, as we talked about, that food becomes very much deranged, compromised, disrupted, and primarily many of the nutrients unavailable to the body. And so though you've put the calories in, the body doesn't register that it's been nutritionally satisfied, and messages are sent to the brain to inform it that you've not been nutritionally satisfied, and the brain triggers more appetite. One can continue eating and eating and eating cooked foods and become more and more over fat because of the calories, but progressively malnourished in the process. You end a meal, but you're still looking for something, because from a nutritional perspective, nutrients your body requires, such as carbohydrates, in their usable, raw, unadulterated form, haven't been provided for. Another thing that people become addicted to is chocolate, yeah? We say that and we have a little grin and a giggle. I can promise you, as a person who focuses their work on helping people with disordered eating, that there are many people whose lives are a misery because of their addiction to chocolate. Take a moment to think about what chocolate's got in it. Chocolate certainly can bring about a shift in your experience. Whereas grains have the opium, chocolate has the cannabinoids. And what other drug springs to mind when I say that?
Marijuana.
Yeah, cannabis. We know again that cannabis can bring about a shift in your experience, psychologically or physically. In addition to that, chocolate contains a toxic alkaloid called theobromine. Theobromine brings about a major shift in how you feel or how you think. The other thing that we have in chocolate is refined sugar. Where does it come from? Usually sugar cane or sugar beets. Has anyone here ever tried to eat a piece of sugar cane? How long did it take you to eat it long? Piece?
The sugar cane. Right?
You had the juice?
Yeah, the juice. Little Havana in Miami.
In Little Havana in Miami. A little piece of sugar cane would take you a long time. You'd get jaw ache or gum ache before you finished chewing it. The refined sugar that we find on our tables in the little bowls and in our chocolate and in our confectionery and our pastries has been through a vast number of processes of greater and greater refinement. It bears very little resemblance to actual sugar cane. Sugar cane, and as you've mentioned, you got a drink of juice from it, is high in water content, high in juice, and it's very high in fibre. By the time it's been refined, what we're left with is not only nutrient devoid, but water devoid and fibre devoid. That means that that sugar is in no way in a state of dilution, and also the fibre isn't present to slow down sugar uptake. What we end up with is a massive sugar surge into our bloodstream each time we ingest it. The blood sugar starts to rocket, and it's very important that your blood sugar level is kept within very strict boundaries. Otherwise, you become one dangerously ill individual. As soon as your blood sugar starts to rise, your body starts to secrete insulin from the pancreas to bring that blood sugar back down within healthful parameters. But because the surge of sugar that's gone in the blood has been so sudden, the reaction of the pancreas is equally as dramatic, and often that rise can then plummet lower than is healthful. And you're left feeling about 15-20 minutes after you've had your bar of chocolate or your cookie that really breathing is too much trouble. You feel incredibly lethargic, and you interpret this as, this is a cookie deficiency. And what you do then is you rush back and you start eating more cookies to try and bring yourself back up. Well, what a magic combination. Once we put chocolate with grain, we've got chocolate-flavoured cookies, or we've got chocolate cake. That is the ultimate. We can get a fix of cannabis, of opium, of theobromine, an increased production of serotonin, and a sugar buzz, all in one go. What an incredible thing. We'll find we're emotionally numb. We've overcome our apparent fatigue by feeling stimulated, which we interpret as energy. It's not energy at all, but your body on red alert. And as soon as we start to drop down from that, instead of realizing that our body is now going about trying to cleanse and heal itself from that infiltration of toxins, we interpret that as we need to go get more chocolate cake, or we need to go get more cookies. Salt is a big issue for many people, that salty craving. And salt, again, is an addictive thing. The more salt that you use in your diet, the more your taste buds will become non-operating. They become progressively more compromised. It's the same with any strong flavor that gives your taste buds a sudden whack of flavor, way above and beyond that which you're naturally designed to experience. If, for example, which I wouldn't do, but if I were to come up and shout loudly in your ear every day, eventually you'd be saying to me, "Pardon? Sorry?" Because you would have started to have lost your hearing. Well, it's the same with your taste buds. If you shout at them every time you sit down to a meal, they gradually lose their sensitivity. And then you have to shout in terms of salts and strong peppers and garlics and so forth for them to hear, or in other words, for them to taste. The wonderful body is designed to heal and regenerate itself. And if we get these powerful, stimulating tastes out of the diet, gradually your taste buds' ability to taste will return. Then you start being able to enjoy the difference between what a romaine lettuce tastes like and what a butterleaf lettuce tastes like. And you get to taste a watermelon for the first time. What we're talking about here is a need to have to go through a process of withdrawal. And it's tough. You may find you're swinging from the curtains, dangling by your toenails from the chandeliers, biting your nails, but eventually you will get the other side, and there lies freedom. And in that place of freedom, you can start making your food choices, rather than your food making your choices for you. How long it takes is an unanswerable question. It depends on so many factors. But one thing is for sure, the idea that slowly weaning yourself off it is the best way is not successful, because every time you intake that substance once again, you set the whole thing in motion and reinforce your addiction. By the end, if you choose to make some decisions to identify things that are harming you and to get them out of your diet, you will feel empowered with the education that you've got about why it's happening. I'm going to pass over now to my partner, Dr. Douglas Graham, who's going to take you through the next phase, talking more about how to overcome these addictive challenges.
And here we are again. It's an interesting thing, the number of times that I thought that I had overcome my disordered eating, the number of times that I thought I had conquered everything there was to conquer in the world of food, the number of times that I was sure that I was past eating cooked food, that I was sure that I was past junk food, that I was sure I'd had my last cookie. It's amazing the way that we can fool ourselves so easily, and how easy it is to give in back again. And over periods of time, I've found that there are many ways to approach or deal with the challenge of trying to free yourself from addictive eating behavior. One thing we can be sure of is that habits get stronger if we reinforce them. We can count on that. And they'll get weaker if we don't reinforce them. What Rosalind talked about, the idea that the concept we're taught, which is to ever so slowly but gradually wean ourselves off of whatever it is that we wish to get free of. It's funny because this isn't the technique that is used in serious situations. If you were an alcoholic, and alcohol was ruining your life, and your family finally intervened and said, "We're going to lock you up somewhere. We're going to send you to a facility," they wouldn't say, you have a problem. You're drinking 36 beers a day. We're going to cut that down to 35 this month, and 34 next month, and 33 next month. And 3 years from now, you'll be down to just a beer a day. That'll be good, because 1 beer a day is good for you. Why wouldn't 36 times as many be 36 times as good? If you were a heroin addict, they don't wean you off of heroin. They say, cold turkey. In 3 days, it'll be done. Psychologically, you won't be completely free. But in 3 days, your body has gone through whatever it needed to in order to get rid of the feeling that was associated with the use of the substance. Psychologically, it takes a good bit longer. But nonetheless, physiologically, we still have to go through some type of a regimen. What is it going to do? What will work for you really depends each time on what kind of person you are. It's not one set answer for everybody, even though if you asked for one, I would say that the easiest way to stop eating chocolate is to stop eating chocolate. That the easiest way to stop eating cooked food is to stop eating cooked food. It's about a decision. But that decision hinges on so many factors in your life because most people's goal isn't as clear as they would like to think the goal is. And there's a part of us that wants our cake and eat it. There's a part of us that wants those tastes of cooked food or that wants those tastes of the various things that we would, behaviors and foods that we would like to get out of our lifestyle. But we want some of those results. And until you're clear on your intention and your goal, it becomes much more difficult. If you just get in your car and you don't have a destination in mind, well, where do I go? I'm going to go in any which direction. The same thing happens with food. Experience running a health retreat for 10 years showed me that the easiest way to get people off, whether it was coffee, cigarettes, alcohol, recreational drugs, prescription drugs, a host of various foods, everything from meat to dairy to grains to the long list of foods that a true health aficionado would say, these are foods that I no longer wish to consume. The easiest way to do it was to simply stop eating completely. Stop eating for several days. Take a couple of days of bed rest. Have all the water you want. Rest and do what we call a fast. Now, fasting has been and still is very misunderstood to me. Fasting equates to resting, and if I want to get a good night's sleep, I don't eat a big meal right before I go to sleep. I don't wake up in the middle of the night and eat. But in the morning, I break the fast with activity. Fasting gives the body a chance to reestablish homeostasis. All of our senses and all of our metabolic processes vector towards normal during the fasting state. We become ourselves again. And any time you're not yourself, including under the influence of some addictive behavior. We don't like to use the word addictive. We say it's a habit. Habit's kind of a nice word for addiction. It gives us a chance to break that spell. Fasting is very misunderstood because a lot of people will talk about other types of fast. Well, I'm on a juice fast, I'm on a fruit fast, I'm on a lot of different kinds of fast. And fast actually, when it's used in those senses, means to abstain from. So really, a watermelon fast would be a diet where you eat anything except watermelon, not just watermelon. There's a nautical concept of the word fast, which means to make fast, like when you tie a line. And when you make fast, then we're sticking to one thing. In that sense, the watermelon fast would be continually eating watermelon. Either way, it's at best a bastardization of terms because the fast itself was a rest. By putting the digestive system at rest, we free up a tremendous amount of bodily energy to allow the body to do other things. The most desperate, the most conservative approach would be fast, end the habit, put it behind you. Even then, a reestablishment afterwards of a new habit, of a healthy regimen, of another way of doing something, because the chances are we're going to go back to what we know. So there are other approaches. There are approaches from the very least invasive, the lightest way of going about it would be to say, I really want to put grains behind me, so I'm going to stop eating them, and I'm going to continue going with all my healthy habits. And let that be that. Or, I really want to stop drinking coffee. Other than that, I'm on an all-raw diet. I meet a lot of people like that. All-raw diet, still drinking coffee. And I really want to stop drinking coffee, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go off of my coffee, and I'm going to live the healthiest lifestyle that I possibly can and hope that coffee finds its way into ancient history. I'm going to go onto a diet of just fruits and vegetables and really keep it tight. I'm going to go onto a diet of just fruits and keep it for a while. I'm going to go onto a diet of just one kind of fruit at a meal. I'm going to go onto a diet of just one type of fruit per day or per week for a period of time. And that might take a week, it might take 2 weeks, but what we find is that when we make food so important, we stop making food choices, that we don't have to think about food anymore. It's the opposite way of what most people do when they're making food so important. They spend all day thinking about it. To a cow, food is really important, but it doesn't think about what to eat, just when to eat. When does a cow eat? When it's hungry. End of the story. If you actually make the commitment to help myself mentally, emotionally, physiologically, physically, spiritually, every way that I can think of, habitually, I'm going to get past that habit that's been holding me back. I'm just going to eat one food. I'm just going to eat watermelon. I'm just going to eat banana. I'm just going to eat mango. Whatever's in season at the time, I'm going to do that for 5 days or 7 days or 10 days. You get to a point where not only will your relationship with food change dramatically, but your relationship with yourself will change. You'll grow. And you'll find that once you have gone through that, maybe only once, maybe several times, not only is it a very pleasant experience, you might wish to repeat it, you'll also find that it's a great way to overcome a lot of the sticky points in your diet that are holding you back.
The term comfort eating, you've probably heard. You've seen it in the glossy magazines. You've even mentioned it amongst your friends. But what does it mean? Does it mean that we feel so sorry for ourselves? We say, wow, poor old you deserve a big piece of cake. Or you deserve a piece of chocolate because you're so miserable. No, that's not what it means. Comfort eating is based in your physiology. And I'll explain this to you so that you really do have an understanding of what is going on when you become aware that you are probably comfort eating. Every second of your life, your brain and your cells are in communication with each other. The cells of your body send messages to your brain telling it what's going on, and the brain processes that information and sends back commands to the cells of your body in return. The brain is governing your physiology. Its ability to do that is reliant upon your nervous system. Your nervous system is so extensive throughout your body that even if I removed every part of you, your bones and your organs and your veins and your muscles and your flesh, I would still see you sitting in the chair there, because your nervous system would form your entire shape. It is that extensive within your body. The nervous system conducts messages along itself, what is known as nerve energy or nerve force. A nerve energy or nerve force is essentially a low voltage electrical current. We know this because we have done many studies in the scientific world to find that out. Even if we look at it in its most simplistic way, if someone was to touch a surface that was very hot, such as the stove, they don't stand there saying, wow, this is really burning my hand, I think I'll move it. What people do is they go, ow, that's hot. And it's that speed with which the message comes from the cells in the hand to the brain to tell the brain that the hand is being burnt, and the brain sends a message back to the muscles of my arm and shoulder to pull away and protect my hand from that heat. This is the speed of a low voltage electrical current. The nervous system does have an accomplice in helping to get messages around the body. That's your endocrine system, your hormones. The difference being that your nervous system serves rather like a telephone network. It's instant and it's quick. Your brain can pick up the telephone and ask to speak with the liver or the kidneys or whatever, and instantly it makes contact via that electrical current of the nervous system. Alternatively, the brain could ask somebody to get on a bicycle and cycle down to the liver, which obviously takes a much longer period of time. And that is an analogy for your hormones, your endocrine system. The point is, your nervous system, your low voltage electrical current, your nerve energy, your nerve force, that really is the bedrock of your vitality and your health, is limited in its supply on a daily basis or even a moment-by-moment basis. If you had a good night's sleep, you wake up in the morning charged up, because sleep is what enables you to charge your nervous energy quicker than you're using it up. So you wake up in the morning, hopefully after a good night's sleep, feeling well charged up, and your brain cell communications are whizzing away without any problem. As the day goes on, you're using up that electrical current in everything you do. From cognitive thought, to physical activity, to digesting food, to conducting emotions, in adapting to environmental temperatures. It's an endless list of things that requires brain-body communication. And as it gets to about maybe 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, you start to be very aware that you're running low on this low-voltage electrical current, and your body is asking you to go and put yourself horizontal, shut your eyes, put yourself on charge. You've got to charge up again. Although your body is conducting millions of lesser tasks simultaneously in every moment, when it comes to the really big tasks that your nervous system is involved in conducting, it is far preferable for that to just focus on one task at a time. Your body has an enormous problem with being challenged by focusing on two big tasks at once. It so happens that digesting food is a major task for your body. You've only got to take one bite out of an apple, and your brain has to send 1,300 messages down its nervous telephone lines to your body, instructing your body how to deal with it in terms of utilizing it, transporting it, getting rid of the wastes, etc. This whole idea that food and eating gives you energy is completely the wrong way around. If food gave you energy after Thanksgiving, the first thing you'd want to do is to leap up and go play sport or go for a run. But what do most people do after Thanksgiving? They stagger over to the sofa, and there's as much as they can do to work the remote, to change the channel on the TV, and then before you know it, they're asleep. It is exhausting on your nervous system digesting food. That's why after Thanksgiving you fall asleep, you recharge, because you're using it at such a great rate. At the same time, conducting emotions is also very energetically expensive. You might think of a time perhaps when you've been very overexcited, or when you've been very upset by something, that afterwards you have slept unusually heavily, often an unusually long period of time. It is exhausting conducting emotions. Are we starting to see a glimpse of insight? If your body cannot simultaneously digest food and conduct emotions, because they're both major jobs, one of them's got to go. And it is so easy to literally eat yourself into a state of emotional numbness. If you put enough of a digestive challenge into your body, there is no available nervous energy to conduct emotions. That's what you're doing. Subconsciously, somewhere along the line, without realizing it, you have learned that if you put enough food in, the emotions seem to go away. So you're stomping around saying, how dare he, how dare she, how could it, I'm a victim, this is terrible, when you open the fridge. Because somewhere you've learned that if that food goes in, your body can't do both of those tasks at one time. You can't emote and digest. And that's what comfort eating is all about. But the point is, unless we learn to deal with our emotions in a more constructive way, how are we ever going to resist the temptation to take away the pain of uncomfortable emotions with eating food? Unfortunately, it's a vicious circle, because when we eat, when we know that we're not hungry and we're aware that we're overeating, or perhaps eating on foods that are outside of our chosen healthy food selection, we start to feel badly about ourselves. The most uncomfortable emotion you can ever experience is a dislike for yourself, or not approving of yourself, or feeling badly about what you've done. That is far more of a worse feeling than somebody else expressing to you that they're not so keen on you. And that uncomfortable emotion, what do you think's the temptation to do to make it go away? Take out the other tub of Haagen-Dazs ice cream, or whatever you have. See the pattern of how that could all unfold. The best way of dealing with emotions. The classic approaches are primarily divided into two branches. One branch says, the really important thing you need to do with emotions is express them. Emotions are energetic in nature. Emotions are energies. That is why emotions can result in crying, laughing, violence. They are energies. They go somewhere. As energies, they fall within the laws of all energetic things. And one of those laws states that you cannot simply get rid of energy. You can only send it somewhere else. Which is awfully assuring when you think that we are energies. If you are trying to express your emotions, what you're trying to do is you're trying to push them onto somebody else. You're trying to say, I don't want to own these, you have them. So we go to the person who's irritated us and we punch them in the eye, or we yell at them, or we do whatever. And we think, this is healthy, I'm expressing my emotions. What you're actually doing is you are denying your emotions. You're denying them, and you're choosing not to experience them, but passing them on to somebody else. And it's not an approach that I recommend. I don't perceive it to be the most healthiest way to deal with emotions. Certainly isn't for the person who's receiving your anger or whatever it might be. Another approach that's taken is to state that if you can adopt a sufficiently superior perspective, you will look and think, goodness me, actually, on retrospect, I have no reason to feel anger. It's completely inappropriate. And I should just look at this from a different perception, and then I can be loving and kind and everybody's happy. This is just another way of denying the experience of your emotions. It's an attempt to rise over the top of them and transcend them. As soon as an emotion has come up with inside of you, it is real and it's yours. And no amount of transcendence or shoving it off to somebody else is going to be working for you in the most productive way. The one thing that most of us have never been taught is the importance of experiencing emotions without attaching them to a soap opera. Usually when a life experience has brought to us an opportunity to feel a certain emotion, when we bring the event to our mind, we churn it over and we go through again. He said, she said, I said, he said, we said. And it all becomes a drama. I mean, we even elaborate a little bit in our own minds as to how terrible it was. And our focus is on the psychological analysis, on the cognitive processes that we work through to analyze the scenario. Another way of avoiding feeling the emotions. The art is to be present with your emotions. Embrace them and own them as yours. If you sit and invite them and you intensify them so that you can fully feel them, they very quickly reduce. However, if you choose to stuff them down inside of yourself with food or with other such addictions, they become bigger. The opposite. The more you suppress them, the bigger they get. Stuffing them down, throwing them to somebody else, or trying to rise over the top of them, long-term never serves us. What serves us is to embrace them and own them as ours, the moment they appear. But to experience them in what we call a witness state of mind. We don't pass judgment on whether we should or should not be feeling these emotions. We don't draw up the scenario with great elaborations and make a soap opera or a drama out of it. We relinquish all attachment to any form of judgment of ourselves or others or the scenario, and we sit with that emotion. This takes practice to do, and there's 4 stages to work through these things. The very first stage is awareness. People have spent so much of their lives stuffing their emotions down with food that they are not aware when these emotions arise in the first place. First, develop awareness of how you are feeling emotionally. And instead of going down the path which most of us have been encouraged to go down, which is to try and push your emotions out of your experience as much as you possibly can, we're encouraging you to do the opposite, to actually be as aware as you can of how you're feeling emotionally on a moment-by-moment basis. Once the awareness is practiced, the second level is acceptance. And acceptance means non-judgmental embracement of what it is that's yours, that you're owning, that's your emotion. Even if those emotions are emotions that are self-destructive, emotions about feeling badly about yourself because you did go and eat 3.5 pounds of chocolate, still try to experience the emotion of self-reproach in a non-judgmental way. That might sound complex, but identify the fact that you are feeling self-reproach and accept without deciding that it's appropriate or inappropriate to do so, and allow yourself to feel that emotion. Our non-judgmental acceptance is a very important part of this 4-stage program. The third stage is the direct experience. And this is where you don't try to stuff it down with food or any other substance or habit. You don't try and project it onto somebody else, and you don't try and transcend it. Direct experience means that once you've got the awareness and that you've accepted it unconditionally, that you literally experience the emotion. You might find that it's manifesting in one particular part of your body. You might think, oh, I can feel this in my throat. You might think, oh, I can feel this in my solar plexus. You might think, I can feel this right down here in the base of my spine. Give it a physical home. You give it a colour. This is anger. This is red. You don't even need to give it a name, though. Many times emotions are very complex because they're made up of more than one emotion, like recipes. And you don't need to say, oh, this is sugar, or is it flour, or maybe it's eggs. Say it's a cake. It doesn't matter. You don't give it a name. But find where it is inside of your body, because that's where you're storing it if you don't experience it. Give it a colour. Even give it a sound. Even sing with it if you want to, but experience it as fully as you can. When you do that, what happens is emotional integration. At that point is once the emotion is fully experienced and becomes part of you, it is then sent to your personal history on an energetic level, integrated within the being of who you are. Once that has taken place, you are then left in a place where your alignment is authentic rather than false. Once you've done that, you are then able to use your higher self for what it is that works for you. You're able to access that part of yourself where the wisdom is held that guides you as to the best way to respond to what was that occurred. You will then be in a position, having embraced, accepted unconditionally, and experienced your emotions, a place of peace and integration, to then approach a person involved that occurred with love in your heart and a sense of completion before you begin to communicate. And you'll feel you're coming from an authentically centered place. This takes practice. You can't learn this information and rush off and do it. If it's something that makes sense to you and something you embrace, that you don't pick your life's biggest, most dramatic event and begin there. Go out there into everyday life. And the first thing that sets a little spark, maybe somebody jumps you in the supermarket queue, whatever, you say, an opportunity to practice awareness, acceptance, direct experience, and then transcend and appropriate behavior. If you practice these little things often enough, when the big issues come up, you'll find that you're able to deal with them. Life is a journey, and once you arrive, you won't be here. Count your lucky stars, you're still on it. Food and emotions are inseparably linked for so many reasons. And I'm going to go over some of those other reasons later on. But this comfort eating issue is a big, significant one. You would be surprised to know the number of people around you that have what we call disordered eating. It's very common and typical of the medical establishment, who I do make a point of speaking badly if I don't subscribe to what they offer. One thing that suits them and works for them is to categorize people, to deal with what comes in through their doors. So people with disordered eating get categorized under things such as anorexia, bulimia, compulsive eating. But I can promise you that I have worked with people suffering from disordered eating for nearly 2 decades. During that time, I have yet to discover 2 people who have the same problem. Though we've got those 3 sections, some people come to me and they say, I've really got an eating disorder. And I say, okay, and we sit down and we talk through it and we unearth what actually is your problem. And it turns out that they really know they shouldn't be combining carrots with raisins, but they're still doing it. And then I get other people that come to me, tell me they're suffering from an eating disorder, and I say, what is happening? And they tell me that most of the night they are sitting by the fridge, either vomiting or eating, and they're considering suicide. So the array of what we are talking about when we say disordered eating is enormous. And it's whatever it is for you. It may be nothing, it may be a little something, it may be a big something. But the most important thing to remember is the law of cause and effect. Things don't happen for no reason or no cause. And if we don't understand something, it doesn't mean the cause doesn't exist. But the temptation is that if we don't understand it, we blame ourselves. We're unworthy, we're badly, we're this, we're that, we're the other, because we went in the fridge or we went down to the cookie shop or the bakery, and that's not what we wanted to do. I encourage you to realize that whenever those kind of things happen, that what's really happening is something's being caused and you are experiencing the effect. There's not one person in this room who I believe is any less capable than anybody else. We apply different causes and experience different effects. A very popular lady, particularly amongst ladies, is Oprah Winfrey. And as I said, I do like quotes. I find them inspiring and helpful and insightful. And a quote from Oprah was, "My philosophy is that not only are you responsible for your life, but doing the best at this moment puts you in the best place for the next moment." That has so much wisdom and truth in it. Mostly when we're sitting there and we're wondering, should I go for the fruit or shall I get into the pasta? That moment of decision when we become paralyzed because of the emergency choice that we're about to make. One good thing to remember is, it's not what I choose to do and what I experience in this moment that's going to affect me so deeply. It's the implications of what I do now and how it will affect me in my next moment. Have a think about that. It's not easy when you're in the grips of an addictive urge to go and do something. But it can help to breathe for a moment and ask yourself a few questions. In what way am I emotionally uncomfortable? You'll still go and do whatever it is you're going to do, but at least you've begun to get in touch with why it is that you're needing to suppress, what it is you're about to suppress. And you find that if you sit down and work through that 4-stage process, of allowing it to come up, awareness, non-judgmental acceptance, directly experience it, then you'll find, I don't want the pasta now, I'd much rather have a mango. So it's certainly worth a try.
What I'd like to do over the next half hour or so is talk with you about controlling your weight and what does controlling your weight really mean. I grew up with a mama who worked for Weight Watchers when Weight Watchers was getting started, and she became infatuated with Weight Watchers because it helped her lose a lot of weight. Of course, in our household, whatever program Mom was on, we were all on. So we were all on Weight Watchers to some degree. Although I was a skinny kid, I was promised that I'd be fat soon because everybody else in the family was fat, so why shouldn't I be? It was interesting how much of an attachment in 25 years of being a Weight Watchers lecturer, 4 or 5 nights a week, Mama got to Weight Watchers and the concepts that they teach. And I see this in almost everything that we deal with in our life. If it's always been so, it's challenging for us to say, now we're going to do it completely differently and think about it differently. But in the light of new information, would change in the way we do things. We see this in many arenas of life. We're not worried about falling off the edge of the earth when we go sailing a boat out into the ocean anymore. We've changed the way we do that, and a tremendous number of things are done completely differently. We pick up a telephone, crank it up and, hello Edna, connect me to Bill. We've come to a new understanding of how the technology works, and most of us have embraced the newer technology. I admit I still have my slide rule, but I don't come up with many needs for it anymore unless I need a ruler to draw a straight line. And one of the things that I learned in school, but it didn't sink in for some time thereafter, was that what you weigh, when they say, I'm 5'10", 150 pounds, that doesn't tell you a lot about that person. It doesn't tell you as much as it used to tell you. It used to be a fairly valid analysis of the person's physique. You could get a picture in your mind. If a man said 100 years ago, I'm 5'10", 150 pounds, you had an idea of what his physique was. But today you don't. Today people are not as fit as they used to be. Today, people are more fat than they used to be. Muscle weighs a tremendous amount more for the same amount of space than fat does. We hear this reflected into the raw food community when people go, ever since I went raw, I'm so skinny. I got so skinny eating raw food. And I go, chances are you were always skinny. It was just hidden underneath a whole bunch of fat. You didn't lose muscle going raw. That isn't the way it works. What you lost was fat that you thought was muscle. It wrapped around the muscle. It marbled through the muscle. It was underneath the muscle. Because it took up space, didn't make it muscle. I know when I look at films of New York City, every once in a while you'll see a city street scene for some documentary or another of New York City and the hustle bustle of 100 years ago, the pedestrian life on the street. And yes, everybody was wearing the same hat and the same coat, but what you'll see is thousands and thousands of people walking by, all of them roughly the same height, all of them roughly the same physique, just trim little men, just everywhere they're going. And you can watch, and you watch thousands of people go by, and you don't see a fat person go by. Certainly when I was in school, we had a fat boy in our class. I won't name his name, but I'm still friends with Tom, and he's not fat now, but he was the only fat boy in the class. In fact, he was really the only fat boy in the whole 5 classes per grade, and he was the only one that was ridiculously huge. Today, I'm told that 90% of the people under 25 years old are obese, and in fact, the number is higher. We're very generous in our measurements of obesity. So knowing your height and weight doesn't tell you the same thing anymore, because if the Pillsbury Doughboy is 5'10" and 150 pounds, we have to figure that the Pillsbury Doughboy doesn't have much muscle, but a lot of fat. Whereas a bodybuilder or a pro football player or somebody that's just a professional boxer might be 5'10", 150 pounds, and there's not an ounce of fat on their body. Or the look from us is not an ounce of fat. One of the concepts that I want to bring to you is the idea of knowing how much fat is on your body. And there's many ways to measure it. There's at least 4 valid ways to measure how much fat is on your body. It's easy to find out. It's easy to get the numbers. And until you reach a goal point of body fat, and you go, okay, I'm at the body fat level that I would like to be. Until that reaches stability, your weight is meaningless to measure. How much body fat is a cause for some different issues Different people have different belief systems on that, but if we look at world-class athletes and say, they're top performers, let's model ourselves after them, we know that the world-class athlete men generally compete, depending on the sport, at between 5 to 10% body fat, and the women between 11 to 16. Granted, there are a few women who go lower, and yes, there are a few specialized sports where even the men will go lower than that, but this is considered the average range, 5 to 10, 11 to 16. If you were going to ask me for leeway, I would certainly say that 10 to 15 would be the top for men, and that 16 to 21 would be top for women. My personal opinion is more than that, and you're fooling yourself as far as health. Whether it's acceptable to you is your decision. What's acceptable? Everyone makes their own decision, and obviously if you're at 24% and you want to be at 20, get down to 23. It's not like you chew your head off. We just say, okay, let's create a plan to gradually drop the fat, which is where we're going. Excess body fat sneaks up on us, starting usually from a pretty young age. Most people didn't get fat overnight. Any weight change that is sudden, whether it's up or down, has nothing to do with fat. It's got to do with water. I've gone out for a run on a hot summer day and come back 9 pounds lighter. But I know that I only lost less than half a pound of fat. The other 8.5 pounds was water. And as soon as I replaced the water by drinking, my weight went right back up to where it was before I went for the run. It sneaks up on us for several reasons. One is that, as Rosie mentioned, there are different cues that the body is given that tell it that we've eaten enough food. One of them is sheer stuffedness. I couldn't eat another bite. And even when people say, I couldn't eat another bite, when the waitress comes along with dessert, they go, I couldn't eat another bite of what's on my plate. I got room for dessert. But if you eat until you just can't eat another bite, the body gets a message, you're full. Your mama used to say, don't eat sweets before the meal, it'll spoil your appetite, which I always said to Mom, well, isn't that the whole point? Isn't that why we eat, to spoil our appetite? I would think you'd want that. I have such a voracious appetite. She would say, I don't want you to spoil your appetite for what I've been making all afternoon. Nonetheless, we know that as blood sugar rises, our sense of appetite decreases. It's why dessert is served last in a traditional meal, because none of the other foods satisfied appetite. So there's still room for more, and dessert will stop it right there. Which Mom said anyway, she knew that. They could have served dessert first in the restaurant, but then you wouldn't have wanted the rest of the meal. Nutrient insufficiency will also drive you to eat. And we see this with heavy people who we would think shouldn't want to eat again for a week or a month, and yet at the end of the meal, they're still going around looking for something. In fact, for myself, as a child, most of the pictures that were taken of me as a child were pictures of me standing in front of the fridge with the fridge door open, looking in to see what could I develop an appetite for, or standing with the pantry door open, looking in, saying, what looks like it's calling my... And it was funny because my parents used to say, if you don't know what you want to eat, don't open the door. And I go, well, I don't know until I find the right thing. And this helps us understand a difference that will become important for the rest of the course and on, which is the difference between hunger and appetite. When you're hungry, you don't care what you're offered to eat. The hungrier you are, the less discriminating you become. Rosie and I have dear friends who went through World War II in Europe, in a place where food was really not available at all, and they were vegetarians. It was a commitment. And as such, they actually ended up digging roots out of the ground off of live plants and eating roots and occasionally trying bark off of trees. When you're hungry, you become much less discriminating. Appetite is exceptionally specific. Would you like some carrots? No. Would you like some blueberry cake? Yes. Would you like lettuce? No, I'm not really hungry for lettuce. How about fudge? Oh yes, I'd like fudge, please. Would you like pasta? No. Potatoes? No. Bread? No. Pizza? Yes. Well, this becomes a very specific thing, appetite versus hunger. So we can look at the reverse of this and go, how do you know if you're hungry? You're hungry when lettuce sounds good. You're hungry when celery sounds good. Just like some plain, please. You're lettuce, you're hungry when any one food sounds really good and appealing. Oh yeah, I'm ready to eat that. I'll have that. A plate of that is fine. I'm hungry. If you're low in blood sugar, if you're low in nutrients, if you're low in volume of food, any of these things will stimulate appetite, hunger, and if when you eat things that don't satiate those desires, then you're likely to overeat. Any food eaten in excess of our needs will be stored as fat. The body does not have the capacity to store protein. The body does not have the capacity to store carbohydrates. Yes, we have functional levels of protein in our body, and yes, we have functional levels of carbohydrate in our body, but you can't store more. You have a 10-gallon gas tank in your car. If I say, hey, I got 100 gallons, let me put it in your car, you go, my tank's half full, I can take 5 gallons, but I can't take the other 95. I can't store. Yes, I've got a functional level, 10 gallons, but I can't store more. We have to convert it over into something else. Could you turn it into paraffin, please, so I can put it in the trunk of my car? But please don't put 95 gallons of gasoline in the trunk of my car. We have no way to store it. So anything we eat in excess caloronutrients, protein, fat, or carbohydrates, will be stored as fat. It's the caloronutrient we have the capacity to store. A lot of times people try to work off their excess fat by exercise. And it's really a tough way to do it because you don't burn much fat through activity. Yes, if you're an incredibly fit person, you can burn a fair amount of fat or a fair amount of fuel through your activity levels. But in general, when you are active, only half of the fuel you consume is actually used from your fat stores. The other half is used from carbohydrates. It's approximately 50-50 carb and fat when we exercise or when we're active of any type. So if you burn 100 calories, 50 of them came from carbs, 50 of them came from fat, and to go 1 mile at an average intensity level that you would say, yeah, that was moderate intense. For some people, moderate intense might be walking. For some people, moderate intense might be jogging. For some people, moderate intense might be rollerblading. But when we do it on foot, walking, running, sprinting, a mile, on average, for each person, moderate intensity, 1 mile is good for about 100 calories. If we only get 50 calories of fat per mile, and we know that it's 3,500 calories per pound of fat, you have to go 70 miles to burn a pound of fat. Unlikely we'll do that in between lunch and dinner. Is it possible to do that? Sure. Walk 2 miles a day. You're burning almost a pound of fat every month. Realistically, any rapid weight change, up or down, is water. Slow weight changes can be fat. They may also be water. Muscles, however, are also heavy feeders. Muscles just sitting on your body use more fuel than anything else in your body except for your nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is the heaviest feeder. Your brain is only 2% of your body, but it uses 20% of your total fuel supplies. But muscles use a lot of your fuel supplies as well. They're heavy feeders. They require fuel even when you're at rest. So they have an impact on what is called your metabolism or your metabolic rate. Now, as that happens, then, putting on a bit of muscle will make it easier for a person attempting to lose weight. Adding a little bit more muscle raises total metabolic rate a bit each day, 24 hours of the day, and it also makes it easier to raise the amount of calories used in exercise. So physical activity certainly plays a role in weight loss, but the big impact is going to be in what we call the hand-to-mouth disease, in the quality of what you eat. In fact, as you make more impact upon the quality of what you eat, the quantity of what you eat becomes less of an issue. As mentioned, the challenge of overeating on total calories is multiplied on the standard American diet, because the standard American diet tends to be a very low volume diet. The water has been cooked out of the food. Take a gallon of water, put it in a pot, stick it in the oven at 400 degrees for 4 hours. A gallon of water will disappear totally, probably in way less. How much water did the turkey lose, or the chicken lose, or the roast lose? It lost almost all of its water. Bread isn't known for its high water content. The standard American diet foods are very low water content, and as they become lower water content, they become lower volume. Experiments have been done attempting to feed people strictly by supplements. We can concentrate the food down into little pills. For astronauts is why this was first done, was to make it possible for them not to have food free floating all around the cabin in zero gravity. It was a miserable failure for two reasons. One, as nutritionists had insisted in advance, we don't know all of the nutrients. We can't keep a person healthy on supplements only, because many of the nutrients are not in the supplements. These nutrients have yet to be discovered. The current estimates are that 2/3 of all nutrients are yet to be discovered, which makes any multivitamin, multi-mineral, multi-supplement, the most comprehensive one of all, is missing at least 2/3 of all nutrients, allowing for the knowledge that nutrients work in concert with each other. Any consumption of single or multi or broad spectrum supplementation is creating imbalances, not solving them. The standard American diet is also very low in fiber. Animal products have no fiber. All refined products have the fiber removed. By removing the fiber, we once again lower the total volume. And as we lower total volume, we run into an issue. The second reason that the tabloid or tablet diet failed was because when the astronauts attempted to eat simply tablets, a few concentrated nutrients in tiny, minute form, they complained bitterly of being hungry. There wasn't a sense of fullness ever experienced. I always feel sorry for the people eating the standard American diet, because I look at their plate and I go, really? That's all you're going to eat? A couple of bites and you're calling it a meal? Turns out that in those couple of bites, they're getting far more calories than I'm getting in 100 bites. I'll sit down and eat all the fruit I care for and not be able to get as many calories as in a standard fast food meal. I could sit down and eat more salad than I could ever eat and not come close to the amount of calories that are in even a standard American breakfast. With this lack of volume from the loss of water and the loss of fiber, it becomes really easy to overeat on total calories. And in the same way, when we raise the fat content of the diet, because fat supplies between 10 to 20 times as many calories per bite, at that point, on a high-fat diet, standard American diet, 43% fat, considered a very high-fat diet, the amount of volume in the meal goes down dramatically, leaving people wanting to eat more. If they eat more of the same food, they end up having over-consumed calories. The problem with taking this exact same concept and bringing it into the raw food arena becomes very clear. If we, in raw foods, remove the fiber from our food by juicing, by creating oils rather than the whole foods, we're reducing the total volume, hence increasing the likelihood of overeating. If we remove the fiber from our food, one thing. If we remove the water from our food by dehydrating, we run into the same problems as the standard American diet has again. We're reducing the total volume, increasing the calories per bite. We end up wanting to eat far more bites in order to get sufficient volume than what we need. Both of these issues tend to lead us, without proper guidance, to eating more fats. Because if we're not getting the calories from our foods initially, we need to get them from fats, because we have not trained ourselves to eat the volume that would be a normal, healthy volume for us to eat. We're coming from a diet where the volume is exceptionally small. And to actually sit down and eat fruit and make a meal of it satisfactory to hold you for 3 to 6 hours or more requires the consumption of a fair amount of food. To eat a salad large enough to hold you from night until morning requires the consumption of a fairly large amount of food. And if we're going to do that on a low-fat diet, high-water diet, high-fiber diet, it requires the consumption of a great deal of food. It is a training process to learn to eat sufficient food. The upside is that you get the nutritive satiation, you get the increased sugar in the diet satiation, and you get the volume sense of satiation simply by eating the foods that we're naturally designed for. Whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic fruits and vegetables. That concludes this session. Rosie.
What we've covered is quite a number of things, but in terms of things that lead us to consuming foods either that we really wish we weren't or simply consuming foods in excess is not just due to comfort eating. There are other reasons that lead us down that path, and I'll take this next little while to go through those with you. Now and then I'll mention something and a little bell will go off and you'll think, oh, that's me. I tend to do that. And hopefully then next time the situation occurs for you, you'll already have been connected with that recognition. One thing that is very typically done amongst many people, when people are feeling tired or fatigued, they misinterpret that as a food deficiency. This is common. Part of the reason it's so common is because the lifestyle that we lead in these modern days, we are expected to achieve in a day what our ancestors would have felt quite proud of achieving in a month. And we're pushed all the time against the clock, against deadlines, and our responsibilities are piled upon us, or we accept them, and we push ourselves to a point where we are psychologically and physiologically exhausted. But instead of recognizing it as a need to lie down and sleep, we try to stimulate ourselves. Whatever food you consume, it doesn't matter what it is, the very first effect it'll have on you as you ingest it is to stimulate you. It may have an eventual effect of creating a sense of drowsiness or sleepiness, but initially it will stimulate you. One thing I suggest that you do, really be tuned in to knowing the difference between tired and hungry. It might seem obvious, but you'd be amazed how often that those two things get confused. The other thing, make sure that you get sufficient sleep. And we're not just talking about duration of sleep. The quality of your sleep, in terms of its depth, is as equally important as the duration. You could survive on a lot less hourage of sleep if you were sleeping really deeply. The danger, of course, is when you're sleeping for a limited period of time, the duration is insufficient, and you're sleeping shallowly because you're stressed. And stress is the major number one cause of insufficient sleep quality. That brings us back to dealing with those emotions. The next thing I'd like to mention is the possibility that perhaps you might eat certain foods because it's your way of recreating something that occurred previously in your life which you'd like to re-experience. It may be just a period in your life, it may be a social scene that you had, or it may be a specific event. And I'd like to share with you a short story about a client of mine who came to me in her mid-40s, and within 6 months she had put on an enormous amount of poundage in body fat. And she came to me very distressed. She told me that she had a real eating disorder, that she could not stop eating. I sat down with her and we took some time to go through more detail of what her problem consisted of. It transpired that there was only one food that she was eating in excess. And that was what we call lemon curd sandwiches. You may not know what lemon curd is. In England, it's a very sweet lemon-flavoured jelly or jam. And she would eat it between 2 slices of white bread with butter, and she couldn't stop eating these lemon curd sandwiches. Obviously, I realised cause, as we've mentioned before. Things don't happen without a cause. We spent a little more time, and we talked a little more about what had been going on in her life. First thing that came up, without any hesitation, was that for most of her life she believed that her mother had no love for her, had no desire to have her as her daughter, and that she'd never really connected with her. And then one day her mother had called her up and invited her to go on a picnic, and she hadn't seen her mother in years, but although she was surprised, she accepted the offer and she went on the picnic. And they had this beautiful walk, and they went to the top of this lovely hill, spread out the picnic cloth, they had this great time, and for the first time ever in her whole life, her mother told her that she loved her. And she told her that she wanted her and she really cared about her and that she always had. She just hadn't been able to express it. And the reason, sadly, that her mother had chosen this day to invite her daughter for the picnic was also to tell her that she was dying of cancer. And it was only a matter of days, in fact, following that picnic that her mother passed on. And guess what they ate at the picnic? Lemon curd, white bread and butter sandwiches. Of course, once my client was able to make this connection, she dissolved into tears, but resolved that she was going to find another way of bringing back that memory. And she became talented at the art of visualization, until the point where she could sit quietly and she could bring back the memory, and she could even smell the new mown hay that was in the fields nearby the hill they sat on for their picnic. And her need for the sandwiches correspondingly evaporated. Maybe in your life, is this something that you eat because you connect it to something? Because you may find a healthier way of bringing back that memory. There are also people, in my experience, who are walking around with this big vacant hole inside of them, this void, and they have yet been able to find a way to nurture and nourish and connect with the side of their life. They feel incomplete. They don't quite know why or what it is, and they're filling themselves with food, trying to fill themselves with something they know is missing. My advice to these people is to try and seek out ways of finding inspiration to allow you to pursue the development of your life. If that was what was leading you to reach out for those foods, you will find that that voracious appetite will significantly subside as you start to feel nourished on a new level. How many of us can ever remember having eaten something as a reward for something? The funniest thing, I shared this with my mother, who I'm very close with. She's a wonderful, loving woman, and she did this out of love and out of the goodness of her heart, and she now understands as well as I do, out of ignorance. But the scenario is this: I detested going to the dentist. I abhorred, and still do, going to the dentist. The first experience I had at the dentist was to have a nerve drilled through with no anaesthetic at the age of something very tender and something very sensitive. My mother decided the way to encourage me to go peacefully along for my regular checkups was that afterwards she would offer to take me out and buy me any amount of confectionery that I wanted. We realised that that's very ironic, seeing as the confectionery was a large reason why I was going to the dentist in the first place. In any case, it certainly worked, and I would go along in my mind thinking, I know if I go peacefully I'm going to get that wonderful bar of what we used to call Ripple chocolate, Cadbury's, but the Ripple variety was a particular version of Gideon that was irresistible. And it worked every time. But we often carry this idea of rewarding ourselves with unhealthful foods. What I advocate is that instead of having an unhealthful food on a pedestal and thinking, if I really behave myself and live up to my own expectations in some way, I will reward myself with one bite or two of this forbidden whatever it is, and it's unlikely to be a forbidden fruit. It's more liable to be a forbidden chocolate or cookie or something else. What I advocate is that instead of seeing these foods as being on a pedestal of adoration, that you identify foods that are harming you. Identify foods that are not taking you where you're trying to get to, and take them down off that pedestal and send them packing. I had this experience with what we used to have a lot of in England, quiche, Black Forest Gâteau. You got the grain and the chocolate and all those addictive things. And I used to have this Black Forest Gâteau on a pedestal. And I would say to myself, if you're good all week, good, right, okay, then at the end on a Saturday evening, because I often used to socialise out at dinner with my friends on a Saturday, you can be rewarded with a piece of that gooey brown thing. I did this for quite some time, till one day the waiter served me this gooey brown thing, and I sat there and something clicked inside of me. And instead of worshipping this splodge of brown gooey stuff, I pushed back my chair from the table and I gave it a talking to, literally. I was saying, look here you give me terrible blemishes on my skin. You give me excruciating premenstrual tension, which is even more excruciating to my friends than it is to me. You give me obesity. You give me mood swings. You give me uncontrollable food cravings. Why on earth have I got you on a pedestal? Get out of my life. And I called the waiter back and I said, I don't want this. He said, isn't it any good? I said, it never was. Devalue things that are harming you. See them in a different light. Eating to punish oneself. That's the flip side of the coin. You make a decision that you're going to lead this perfect life and you're going to eat the ideal diet, and you do it all the way through till after breakfast. And then it so happened that you walked into your friend's kitchen and they were baking cookies. And although when you got out of bed you'd made this absolute commitment to a raw vegan diet, there stood those cookie crumbs. And your friend offers you the tray and says, here, would you like to scoop up the crumbs left over? And the aroma goes up your nose and ecstasy starts to happen. You reach out and you have a crumb. a crumb possibly contains a calorie. It possibly contains one microscopic remnant of animal fat that you said you weren't going to eat. One microscopic remnant of various deranged nutrients that have been subjected to heat. Nevertheless, that one crumb was enough to you to say to yourself, you are hopeless. You made a commitment, you've blown it completely, you've eaten a crumb of cookie, you may as well now eat the whole jar. What you're actually saying to yourself is, I disliked you so much for eating that one crumb that I'm now going to allow yourself to abuse yourself. Because you know that these foods are destroying your health. You pull up a chair with your friend and you eat the whole jar. You wake up in the morning feeling lousy as all heck. When you slip and slide, I have a little quote, which luckily I can remember as I left it down the bottom there, that there is a difference between winners and losers. When a winner slips or slides, they just get straight back on track. But when a loser slips or slides, they allow it to keep slipping and sliding worse and worse and worse. So what if you ate a crumb of cookie? You're doing your best, and your best is always good enough. It's amazing when we look back through the way that humans have related to each other to find how physical touch has become less and less part of our culture. It's got to the point of a ridiculous now where an adult is not allowed to touch a child unless they are its direct parents without the danger of being sued for molesting the child. We're also in a state whereby a woman almost daren't touch another woman in case she's accused of being a lesbian. We've got a situation whereby a man daren't give a woman a hug in case it's perceived to be sexual harassment. So many of us live our lives starved of human touch. And one area that I've worked extensively in is that of with older adults. Here we have another touch-starved situation. When you don't physically feel as attractive as you used to. When you've got hair disappearing from where it's supposed to be and appearing where it's never been before, it can be disturbing. And you don't feel that you can reach out to be touched by other people. And so often, older people crave touch so badly. Perhaps they've lost their partner and they're on their own. They don't get touched. And so the idea of going to a tea dance where they can actually hold someone and dance, they're not there for the dancing. They're there for the touch. But it's not just older adults. How many of us secretly crave touch throughout our days? How many of us end up eating food to try and comfort ourselves, to try and numb that feeling of craving touch? I am a tremendous advocate of massage. It's one of my greatest pleasures in life and one that, God bless him, indulges me in on a daily basis. I love to be massaged. I love to be touched. It's almost a form of air that I have to breathe to feel touched. And I'm demonstrative and tactile by nature, and I will go up and hug people, and sometimes I hug them and I feel them go, and I think, oh, that was a mistake. But usually when I go up and touch people, their response is, oh, at last. Someone who can just touch me without feeling inhibited. Maybe if you're feeling starved of touch, it can help you to reach out to animals. They're not going to accuse you of sexual harassment or sexual disorientation or child abuse. Animals love to be touched. Go out and find someone else's domestic pet if you don't have one on your own. Spend time. Take up dog walking. Do whatever you need to do. Bring touch into your life, and then food won't need to be used to replace that starvation. I also have worked with clients who, when we've talked for some time, have eventually felt comfortable enough to admit to me that they're feeling sexually frustrated. And as a result of that, they eat, because they find, again, food is a really good way of numbing them out from awareness of that need. And my advice other people have found helpful, to consider that the sexual act is really a manifestation of a combination of love and creativity. And that one can put love and creativity into other things. I had one client who came to me who was a very well-to-do lady, very high up in the business world, but a single lady who hadn't got a partner, and she did admit to me was suffering from sexual frustration. And rather than meet that sexual need in an inappropriate way, what I advised her to do was to find something whereby she could express her creativity in a loving way. It started as a hobby. She started to go around to other people's houses because she loved interior designing. And she would say to her friends, if I were you, I would put this wallpaper here, and I'd move that piece of furniture over there, and I'd dispense with that table altogether. Eventually, she became very popular, and another friend recommended her to another friend. She eventually started up her own business as an interior designer. The last I heard of her, she was having a blast. Whether or not she found a partner, I was never to find out, but I certainly know from her that she found her sexual frustrations and consequently her eating disorder had become a thing of the past. The time when I eat inappropriate quantities of food, although I do achieve in my striving to keep things within the range of my food boundaries in type of foods, but the time when I eat when I don't need to is when I'm flying in aeroplanes, because I find it intolerably boring. I mean, you can sit and read a book for only so long. You can walk up and down the aisle pretending to have fun for only so long, and there becomes a point where visits to the bathroom are more trouble than they're worth. You sit there and you think, what can I do now? And you've seen the movie 3 times already, and you're on a long-haul flight between America and the UK. It's a long way. Eventually I find myself reaching into my bag. Oh, I think I have an apple in here. That'll kill some time. I can eat a tomato. I don't need to eat all this food. I'm sitting sedentary. I'm doing nothing. I'm eating out of boredom. One teaching that I have very luckily become a recipient of is teaching through the Buddhist philosophies of life. Through that, I also discovered an individual called Thich Nhat Hanh, who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize during the Vietnam War. He said, if you are totally and utterly present in any given moment, you could never possibly be bored. I can't say that I've achieved it yet, but it's certainly something I'm striving to do. Another issue, pleasure. Eating is designed to be pleasurable. It's made that way to ensure that we do it, because if we don't do it, we don't survive as a species. The same reason sex is pleasurable, because we want to do it, because if we don't, we won't exist. Eating is designed to be pleasurable, but it's not designed to be the only pleasure in a person's life. The number of people who I've sat down with and I've said, okay, let's make a list of how many things, on average, on a regular day, do you do that you truly find pleasurable? And you know what the thing is? They start to list all the things they don't find pleasurable. They say, well, I have to get the kids ready for school, and that's always a real stress, and then I have to help my husband get off to work, and then I've got to get off to work, or if it's a man, it's often the same sort of scenario, quite honestly, these days. And then there's the issues about the things they have to do at work that they don't really want to do to get money that they don't need to buy things they don't want. And the list goes on. So eventually they say, oh, but I enjoy my dinner. Is it any wonder that some people overeat? It's their only form of pleasure. We deserve to have pleasure in our lives. So think about that. Do your own list. How many things on a regular basis do you do that bring you pleasure, or you do it for no other reason? And if the only one you can come up with is food, I can guarantee you'll be overeating. If that's true for you, find and identify things that you enjoy and find pleasurable, and bring them into your life. On it, you'll find your cravings for food as your only source of pleasure will dissipate accordingly. Food is used in so many cases for love, where love cannot be otherwise. And I know this is very common, not just in families, but amongst friends. People will go out and meet for lunch or meet for dinner. The reason that they're doing it is because they are finding ways of sharing food together, which is perfectly healthful, but it becomes unhealthful when both parties are eating unhealthful foods to excess. It's commonly seen amongst parents with children, particularly individual adults who find it difficult to express love, that they will give their children food instead of holding them close and just saying, I love you. They will give that child food. So developing one's communication skills is essentially a very important part of being able to open up one's heart. Because if you can open up your heart but you can't express yourself, you've only got half of the formula. And communication skills are a really important thing to develop and learn. What about meals out and dining out? What about social acceptance? This is another issue. If I could pick one reason why people tell me they can't embrace a raw vegan diet, is because it will be socially unacceptable. Doug and myself were working with some clients over in the UK who were very well off financially and were the owners of an enormous company and had a rich social life. And according to them, they ate out 6 nights a week, and a lot of lunches they ate out too. We sat and spoke with them extensively about the nutritional facts that surrounded the whole program, what we were teaching. And at the end of it, they said, we totally understand what you're telling us. It makes so much sense. Neither of them were in good health, and they were only in their late 30s. Said, it makes so much sense, and you're absolutely right. It's as clear as anything. And I said, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to nip upstairs because I wanted to photocopy something for them. It's an excuse I usually use to allow my clients time to just quietly sit and reflect on any questions questions they might have when I come back before they leave. When I came back downstairs, I said, is there anything you'd like to just mention before you go? And they said, well, yes, we can't do this. And I said, we thought that you had just said that you fully understood why we were telling you what we were, and it all made sense, and it was obvious, and you both wanted to get healthy. And they said, yes, but we realised that it's health and this diet or our social life. We have to choose one or the other, and we've chosen our social life. That is very common for people to feel that. The advice I gave them was, you feel that you are unable to communicate with your friends and your work colleagues if you're eating different food than they are? And they said, well, basically, yeah, that's it. I said, how about this? How about you look upon it that your difference, your uniqueness, is what will attract people towards you. It is what will create a point of interest for people. It is what will cause people to lean over and say, that looks good. Why are you eating that way? It'll give you an opportunity to open people's eyes to the levels of health they could be experiencing, and for that they will thank you. It could be the start of improved communications, improved popularity, and a way of drawing even more people into your social circle as they want to know about what you're doing, as they see your eyes start to shine and your skin become translucent and your muscles to appear from where there was previously fat. They will start to want to know, you've got what I want. How do you do it? You will gain more friends. People aren't interested in people who are practicing the same habits as everybody else, who look extremely unhealthy, and who don't have the energy to raise so much as a smile. People are interested in people who've got what they want. And I hear now that their company reception room looks like a fruit stall. A couple of final things to mention before I close here. One is the issue of control. And this obviously is very closely connected with the classified condition of anorexia, the other end of the scale. If people feel out of control of what is happening in their lives, it might just be that they choose to strictly control their food because they feel it's the only thing that they have control over. It's possible too that one might become obsessed with one's diet. An obsession with anything in and of itself is unhealthy. An enthusiastic pursuit of something is one thing. An obsession is quite something else. Food is used not only by people to bring some form of control to their own lives, but food is also used to control other people. If you don't do your homework, you won't get your dinner. If you're good, I'll give you this food as a reward. It all started in childhood. What happens is we adopt it and take it on board and treat ourselves in the same way. If one is feeling a lack of control in one's life, it is common for that to typically be rooted in two specific issues. One is a lack of personal boundaries, and two is a lack of ability to communicate not only effectively but assertively. When I say the word assertive or assertiveness, it's common for people to think assertiveness means bulldozing your way through life and getting what you want. It doesn't. My definition of assertiveness is clearly and calmly expressing your wants and needs whilst clearly and calmly respecting the wants and needs of other people. And if you're a person who feels out of control in your life and you need to control your food so strictly, you need to weigh everything. And the nation is a nation of chicken leg weighers. If they're not weighing it for calories, they're weighing it just because they have to control the amount. I suggest that if those people invested a little in some assertiveness training from a respected and professionally run establishment or in a book, plus the fact that they really explored their own personal boundaries, they would find they felt more in control of their lives and needed to be in less control of their diets. Personal boundaries, in and of themselves, can often be attempted to be replaced by foods. When people feel that they are unable to say no when asked to undertake responsibilities, another way of avoiding that is either to be too fat to do it or too sick to do it. So it serves people sometimes to carry that extra body fat so that when someone says to them, would you mind coming over to my house and modelling some of these clothes that I want for my clothes party, instead of saying, no, actually, I really have better things to do with my life, or whatever it is, it's easier just to say, oh, I haven't got the figure for it. We can use body fat and we can use unhealth, disease, to create our boundaries for us. And if you're able to create your own boundaries effectively, you don't need those things, and you can let them go. Out of all the things that we've covered, there may be one thing that you can relate to your own personal experience. One thing that set a little alarm that said to you, hey, yeah, I think I do that. And if that's the case, I encourage you to just raise your awareness to that. And it may well be the first stepping stones for you to take you further along the path to where you're trying to get to. I'd like to finish on a quote I have in a book. We've talked a lot about awareness. We've talked a lot about being more aware of your thought processes, being more aware of your emotions, being more aware of the choices you're making with your diet. This little quote comes from all the sayings of the Buddha. It says, your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own thoughts unguarded. But once mastered, no one can help you as much. But once mastered, no one can help you as much. But once mastered, no one can help you as much. But once mastered, no one can help you as much. But once mastered, no one can help you as much.